Hi, it's Nicole, and today I'm doing my July wrap-up. In July I only read 2 books, and the first book that I read was Firefly, The Unification War, Volume 1. This is a comic version of the cult classic TV show Firefly, and I really liked that TV show, and I think it's a real shame that it got discontinued and it's probably never coming back. So after rewatching the series recently, I thought it might be fun to pick up the comic and continue that journey with the series. I found that the comic was really true to the voice of the series, and I could really imagine it as the show but in comic form, and I really liked that. So I think I'll probably continue with this comic series, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who was a fan of the show. The second book that I read this month was the Extinction Rebellion Handbook, This Is Not a Drill. So Extinction Rebellion is a group, or rather a movement, that is trying to make people aware of the extent to which our climate is in need of our immediate action, and trying to make people aware of how great the ecological crisis that we're facing is. It's trying to push governments to be really upfront about the situation, and it's trying to push governments to act, trying to get them to declare climate emergencies, trying to get them to act as though we are in a climate emergency, because we are, and trying to change the shape of our societies, our governments, our systems, and get them to be a lot more democratized, to get them to be a lot more publicly owned, and get people to be in charge of how the world is run, in hopes that things would start to become a lot more just in the way that we organize ourselves as societies, and hoping that we act in such a way that we're not leading to our own extinction. And that's, I think, pretty much what Extinction Rebellion is all about. That's all just in my own words, so I would highly advise you look at their website. They could easily be marketed as some sort of like group of eco-radicals and stuff, and in the literal sense I suppose they are eco-radicals, but at the same time they are super reasonable, and what they're asking for seems to make a lot of sense to me. I don't think it's extreme in any way, especially considering that we need to be a lot more urgent in our own actions, and we're not doing that right now. When I first came to this book, I wasn't sure if it would be worthwhile after reading This Changes Everything, which was so in-depth and extensive, but I actually got something completely different from this book, and I'm really glad that I picked it up. Although This Changes Everything was very broad in what it covered and making sure that it had a global sort of perspective, this feels even more like it has a wide-ranging perspective, because rather than being reported on by a single person who, albeit, is interviewing a diverse range of people, this, on the other hand, is a collection, so each chapter is written by a different person with a different perspective. There are Indigenous perspectives in here, as well as scientific ones, as well as technological perspectives, and just a very broad range of people's voices are featured, and I really appreciated that. I also felt like it has a more personal feel to it. Although it does have aspects of being an assessment of the situation, it is a lot more personal, and I think the perspectives are clear that they are, I don't want to say biased, but they are clear that this is from their perspective and they are not trying to claim to have all of the information. I would say though that I was expecting there to be a lot more guidance in terms of what to do as an individual about things, and there is that, but it mostly feels like a manifesto to me and a series of personal accounts, even though it does provide specific actions about what you can do, how to protest, how to take part in a lot of the major actions that Extinction Rebellion does. Clearly I've been very interested in this topic for a while, and recently I've been reading a lot more on it, and some of the things that really stuck out to me in reading this particular book was, again, the idea of a lot of the actions that government is taking is putting a lot of the toll of climate change on the most vulnerable people, or people who are not really the root of the problems. And it talks about how doing that can force a rift between people who are economically vulnerable and climate action. It mentions the Gilets jaunes riots in France and how on the surface looks as though it's poor people versus environmental action, when really, instead of proposing strategies that would hit the people who are the most economically vulnerable, Macron's government probably should have tackled the issues with free market capitalism and looked at how people who are most flexible and most able to help can help. Because if you are charging low-income individuals and small local businesses extra for the cost of just getting around, and public transport is not sufficient it's not cheap enough or it's not extensive enough for people to get around without cars, then you are just putting a lot of cost on people that they can't afford to avoid. Whereas if we would actually combat the fossil fuel industry, those actions are a lot more helpful, they have bigger impacts, and they're not punishing the people at the bottom who are most vulnerable. And that's just talking about within first world societies. That doesn't even yet begin to address how more developed countries are putting a lot of climate pressure on less developed countries and indigenous people. So that was one of the things that really hit home for me. Actually, another thing that stood out to me is the fact that Extinction Rebellion is proposing drastic action that needs to start happening immediately. They are proposing this knowing that that might not happen, and there's an element of I can feel the conflict in reading these pages and just in my connection to the problem. It is probable that we are too late to stop a lot of the irreversible problems that have already kicked off. So then you think, why bother doing anything? And the point is because we need to anyway. And even if we are to be facing some massive apocalypse, we need to rethink how we do things. We need to rethink who our societies are helping and hurting and a lot of other things besides. And this just talks about that conflict of being too late but doing the action anyway, and that really had an impact on me. I would absolutely recommend this book as well as This Changes Everything. I don't think that they are in competition with each other. I feel like both books do very different things, though I would note that if you're looking at this to be a guide of loads of things that you can do, it's not really that, and that's kind of what I was expecting from it. However, I don't feel let down by it in any way, because what it did provide me I found really interesting and informative, and I liked the book. So that's all for today, and I will see you again next time. Bye.